Hey everyone, so I'm back here with another monitor review, I suppose you could call it. This is the Acer Predator XB271HU gaming monitor. More specifically, the model number is XB271HU. It has the NVIDIA G-Sync module. It's an IPS panel. It's a 1440p resolution monitor, and it features things like ULMB, and it also has the 165Hz overclock on it. So I believe natively it's 144Hz, but you can bump it up to 165. I have it set to G-Sync on and the 165Hz overclock. So yeah, typically with IPS panels, I am not a huge fan of them usually because in my limited experience, they've always had problems with backlight bleed and clouding. Now, I thought that I would at least give it another look. You do have to go through, in some cases, many panels to find one that you deem acceptable. Everyone is different, though, in what they find acceptable quality when it comes to a monitor. There are some people that I know who, if there's one or two dead pixels, no big deal. For me, I can't have any dead pixels. I don't care if it's a high resolution monitor and the pixels are so tiny that, you know, in most cases you won't really even see them from a normal viewing distance. But I will not accept for the cost of what these monitors are. Like, this monitor is extremely expensive, and it's still extremely expensive even though it's been out for a few years. Dead pixels, clouding, and light bleed are defects. Now, IPS glow is not a defect. Every typical panel has a glow issue. It depends on, you know, which you prefer. You know, VA panels, they have glow, but it's very faint. It's like a light purple, blends good with the black panel, so you don't see it so much. IPS, depending on, you know, the panel, it can look a little bit yellow or white, and some are worse than others. And then with TN, it's similar to VA, where there's kind of like a blue, light blue glow, and again, blending with the black panel, it blends fairly well, and it's not so bad. So typically IPS stands out a little bit more with the IPS glow. It's really only on black backgrounds that you'll see that from an angle. When you're head on, like how we are right now, you don't notice any IPS glow, whether it's a black screen or an image on the screen like we're seeing here. I went through two panels of the Acer. The first one was pretty good, had a couple dead pixels, little bit of clouding and light bleed on the right hand side of the monitor, mostly at the top corner. And so I thought, oh, I'll try another one. You know, even though I was actually, you know, pretty surprised at the first one. So I got the second one here, open it up, set it up. It's perfect. No dead pixels. This monitor has really changed my opinion about IPS. There's no light bleed, no clouding. Now, of course, I do have the monitor configured, so the brightness is not set at like the default 80% that was on when I turned the monitor on. It's way too bright anyway. No one's gonna, you know, want to have their monitor set at a maximum brightness like that, especially IPS, because IPS has a really high brightness than typical panels. So I have it set right now to 30%, which is it's not too dark and it's not too bright. Of course, the darker you make the brightness, the better the blacks are, and you can get more of a contrast, right? So other than that, I didn't really have to change the settings too much from this monitor. I didn't have to tweak the colors very much. It's actually, for my eye, very appealing. I mean, I don't have the equipment to, you know, get to you know, get the exact readings of everything, but from what I've read online, you know, you don't really have to change the colors and the gamma and everything on this particular monitor from out of the box. It's actually set really well. So it is on the warm side, which is, you know, personal preference. Some might like, you know, going a little bit to the colder side, but I prefer the warm side. It's a little bit more natural. So here we have the Acer on the left and the Foris on the right. So as I was saying, the Acer is an IPS panel, the Foris is a VA panel. So both are 8-bit panels, and both have been calibrated to be as warm as they can be with the settings. So as you can see, with the Acer, it does look a little bit more warm, and that's just the nature of the IPS panel. The VA panel, it leans a little bit more to the cold side, even though I've tried to configure it to be warmer. The biggest advantage a VA panel has is the incredibly high native contrast ratio. This panel is rated anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 to 1. The Acer is rated at 1,000 to 1, but from what I've seen with other people who have done more accurate testing, the Acer does get a little bit over 1,000 to 1 static contrast ratio, which is really good. Typically IPS panels haven't had really great contrast ratios, but as they've improved over time, they've gotten a lot better. Both screens have a form of like anti-glare. They're matte finish, so that's really good for reflections. There's a lot of crappy IPS panels out there, way more than there should be. Hopefully, as you know, technology improves and people should not accept crappy quality, so return, because that's the only way companies will realize that they can't mess with the consumers. That if you just return it, they're not getting your money. So that's the best way you can communicate that you want quality over, you know, whatever they're giving you. I have my wide angle on right now on my camera, so this is at ISO 800 4.5 f-stop. I try to pick settings on the camera that give you an accurate representation of what I see with my eye. So here we are in a dark room. I like to use this movie in particular because of the darkness that it has, and it has a letterboxing, so you can get an idea of what if there's any clouding or light bleed and things like that. It's a really good way to show off the contrast ratio, and as you can see, the IPS panel looks really good compared to the VA panel on the right. Again, you can see, especially with this scene, the VA panel has that blue to it, so it's a little colder. The IPS has a little bit of a warmer picture to it, and that's just the nature of the panel. I could, of course, go colder on the IPS panel, but that's not my preference. The VA panel, that's as close as warm that I could get, and it still looks a little cold. So again, I'm set at 1600 ISO right now, 4.5 f-stop. I'm on a wide angle lens here just so I can, you know, get a good idea of both monitors. Yeah, I don't see any clouding or light bleed at all. This isn't 100% an accurate representation of how it looks to my eye. Really, I should be bumping up the ISO to, you know, over 1600. Like 32 maybe, but once you increase the ISO, then you start to get artifacts on the screen and things like that, and then the quality just doesn't look so good. Even 1600 is kind of gonna show some of that. So yes, the blacks on the IPS are not nearly as good as the VA panel, but they are really good. I am really impressed, and I am very picky when it comes to monitors. I don't accept light bleed, clouding. One of the problems I have with TN panels is that even if you can get a TN panel that has a really high contrast ratio for a TN panel, there seems to be like this dirty, you know, sheen to it. You know, like there's really bad separation between the contrasting of your light colors and your dark colors. Like, so IPS does that better than TN. So yeah, other than that, I mean, obviously the biggest advantages of a IPS panel are viewing angles. Although this VA panel does a really good job with viewing angles, and compared to a VA panel, the IPS is a little faster. So obviously I can get up to 165 Hertz. It's a 4 ms response time. The VA panel is 120 Hertz. It's not 4 millisecond response time. It's probably realistically like, you know, around 10 milliseconds or even a little bit higher depending on you know, what's on screen. So, you know, there's trade-offs with VA panel. They're slower, but the quality is really good, high contrast ratio, great blacks. So, you know, every monitor has its pros and its cons. But I would say that this particular IPS panel has changed my mind about IPS panels. Even though there's a lot of crappy IPS panels out there, because I've gone through them myself, I was, you know, really surprised by this. It's extremely expensive, obviously. You're going to pay a lot more because of the G-Sync. So, I mean, if you don't have an NVIDIA graphics card and you don't need G-Sync, you know, I'm quite certain there's an equivalent that doesn't have the G-Sync, so then you can save some money there. The G-Sync does add a cost to it, but the G-Sync is really great. AMD has its equivalent, which is the FreeSync, although I think G-Sync is better. This is a good indicator of like looking for light bleeding and clouding. I don't see it. So yeah, obviously I've decreased the brightness on the IPS panel. It's at 30%, but that's not too dark and that's not too bright. The VA panel is set at 80%, but again, that's just the difference between the technology. VA panels you have to set brighter. IPS you don't, because the newer IPS panels, they just shoot out a lot more light than VA panels do. So that's why there's the difference there. I'm gonna keep this IPS panel. I didn't think I would. I'm really shocked. So I'm gonna keep the VA panel because the Foris is really hard to find. It's unique for what it is, and I'll probably just use the VA panel for either another machine or maybe a dual monitor setup, but I'm going to be doing my primary gaming and everything on the IPS panel just because it's faster. You know, it has the G-Sync, and yeah, the quality is actually really good. The one other thing I want to point out with the Acer monitor is because it's been out for a while, they've had time obviously to, you know, fix any quirks and things like that. There were issues when the Acer came out. This is a December 2016 build, so it's fairly recent. And that's the other thing that maybe to keep in mind with monitors is when they first come out, maybe it's wise not to buy them right away. Maybe it's a good idea to wait a little bit, you know, because then they have time to, you know, do firmware updates or fix quality control issues and things like that. Because this Acer monitor did have a lot of issues when it first came out with its firmware and quality control. There's an equivalent, which is the Asus model. Uses the exact same panel, but from what I understand, Acer is the better pick because they actually own or partially own the company that makes the panel itself, so the screen. And then Asus actually has to buy those from that company, which again is either wholly owned or partially owned by Acer. So one would assume that Acer's getting the better quality panels, would be my theory. And you're going to save a little bit more money with the Acer because they're Asus, you're paying the Asus tax when you buy their products. I know because I've done it, and I used to be an Asus fan. I used to buy all their stuff, but then I realized that there's a lot of other things out there that do the exact same thing, but they don't cost a premium because they're Asus. So, and Asus has a really bad RMA procedure, from what I've heard. Even though I never had to go through it, I got lucky. So yeah, highly recommend this Acer Predator monitor. I would not recommend it if I didn't really believe in it, because like I said, I'm very picky. I do not accept anything when it comes to light bleed, clouding, any kind of monitor defect, dead pixels, stuck pixels, anything. So for me to recommend this monitor is a big deal. it's changed. This monitor has changed my mind about IPS. And if this is a sign of the quality of IPS now, then it's only going to get better. Obviously, there's new technologies coming out like OLED and things like that that are gonna, you know, change a lot of things. But for now, this is what we have, and this is, you know, fantastic in my opinion. So yeah, I'm gonna close off this video. Any questions? Let me know. Any comments? Share your experience with this monitor if you've used it. And yeah, I'll be back for another video sometime.